We're here in New York at the Crooked Fringe Studio, and this is my beautiful model, Caitlin. Say hi, Caitlin.
Hey, how's it going?
Caitlin's got gallons and gallons of hair. It's a little bit past her shoulders right now. It's super, super thick, and we're going to be transforming her hair with the razor today. You can see I've started off on the hairline. We're doing a little subsection, a baby section right along the base of the hairline as an undercut. And there's going to be a bob that lives on top of here. The reason for this undercutting is because how low her hairline is, a bob will grow out very quickly, and it'll be hard to get it to sit well. So basically you'll notice I grab the hair, lots of tension, sometimes even just with pinching, grab it in the direction that it grows. In some cases it grows up, in some cases it grows down. That's what hairlines do. So hold it in the direction that it grows, and then using the blade in a more flat manner, try to cut this down short but very soft. Now again, as the haircut develops, this will just disappear really under the bob shape. So you'll notice it's all about moving that blade, we call it the stroke, moving it consistently. And sometimes when you're going short like this, you can actually do it freehand. Cut in.
Gina and Michaela are here with us.
Hi guys, some of our longtime viewers. I sound like a TV game show host or something. But thanks guys, you know I always appreciate that you watch. And I thought tonight it would be nice if I cut some hair. I get so excited about having all the guests on, and usually I'm hosting, but a lot of people have been asking me to show some razor cutting, which is something that I'm really passionate about. And we just came off a big weekend here in New York teaching scissor versus razor with my good buddy DJ Muldoon, so I was ready. I was primed and ready, and I knew my great model Caitlin here was ready for a haircut.
Oh, absolutely.
There she is.
You have a friend joined too? Oh, cool.
Okay, so you can see with the razor I've taken that off pretty quickly and pretty softly, but I do like to detail with the scissor, using a little scissor over comb on the very edges, bringing the hair in the opposite direction, just at the very edge. I don't want to cut it very, very short. And again, if you're going to take this very high up the back of the head, it's something different. You know, you're doing an undercut, maybe something a bit more dramatic. This is really meant to just disappear, and you'll see later as the haircut develops, this really just disappears and helps the bob line sit better. Again, some tips when doing this: always cut in the direction that the hair grows.
Just get over here. Hey,
Use
Susan
lots
Ford.
of tension. And then you can do a little bit of scissor work right on the skin to clean up some of the stuff that's going to be below. The bob line is going to basically cover this. So obviously you want to keep that in mind. Or sometimes, you know, a little bit of the hairline can peek through in the middle and you get that like little 1920s kind of V shape in the center.
Estelle, Jay, hello. Matthew, nice to have
A
you
little
guys here.
more right here. Thanks guys for joining. Love the support. And again, please, any questions that you have. All right, so we've taken that hairline down pretty softly. You know, short but soft is the key here. Looking for something kind of organic and fluid. Okay, so as I mentioned, Caitlin's got a ton of hair. So I've done a lot of subdividing here to control this shape. And the texture changes a little bit. She's got a little bit more wave and movement through the bottom, and then it gets thicker and straighter through the top. So I've just kind of broken it down based on the head shape into these 3 panels. One from the top of the occipital bone to the nape, one above that, and one on the top of the head. Now I'm going to come in, and the lesson tonight and the technique tonight is going to be based off of what I call razor graduation. If you watched last week when we had my good buddy Ricardo cut a beautiful haircut that everyone really enjoyed, he did a scissor graduation using a very similar approach where he used elevation and kind of worked from an outline into the hair. Now I'm going to use an outline. I'm going to create the outline right now. I'm not really going to need to elevate because I'm just going to vary my strokes to create that, and you'll see what I mean as we work in now. So very important when working with the razor to lock and load. So I use the pointer finger to pull the razor back, and I hold the comb far away. The difference between this and this to keep myself safer. Very important to comb with great tension right from the section. Fine teeth of the comb right in at the root, combing the hair back. And you know, with this type of razor cutting, you cut above your hand. So I'm going to come in right above my knuckles with a very short, closed, small stroke to try to get more of a baseline. I don't want a lot of graduation or texture on the outline here, because this is basically the baseline. What you cut off in your hand is what you leave on the head. So if you look at it closely, and maybe you can see that there's more of a line there. Not as blunt as a scissor cut, but definitely a clean line for a razor. Fine teeth of the comb, coming in the opposite direction. Now using the heel of the blade and working from that shortest point out. Stopping to look for my balance. I can see that slight curvature. I might be a little bit heavy on this side, but I'm not going to let it affect me too much because I can check it just with a little bit of point cutting with my scissor. You know, the thing with razor cutting, especially on the perimeter, is if I go over it too many times with the razor, it might get too soft. So I can actually toughen this up with the point of the scissor.
Eddie wants to know when you're going to be back in Montreal.
I think, you know, I know that one of our major sponsors and some of our good friends from Davenez are doing an event in Montreal, I believe in the next 6 months or so, and they said they'd love to have us come up there again. So we'd love to visit.
Sage wants to know about your razor.
Okay, my razor is my best friend. I sleep with it at night. It treats me very, very well. Now I'm using, right now I'm using my scissor. So this is the Hairbrained HB1 by BMAC. And I do incorporate it into my razor cutting to check because I want to make sure that this line is right where I need it to be. You know, without overly stretching it out, I'm just detailing it and looking for that balance. Okay, now I'll get back to the razor. So the razor that I use and recommend is the Feather Plie. Most of you know it as either the red handle or the black handle. A few years ago, Feather made a limited edition wood-handled razor for our friends at Bumble and Bumble. And then I think they only made 1,000 and they stopped producing them. Recently, they've released some more. And we have them, we actually sold out of the first bunch on Hairbrained Pro, but we're getting some more soon. So if you're interested in the wooden handled razor, we'll have it at Hairbrained Pro. Okay, back into the haircut. So I think, you know, one of the common misconceptions or, you know, things that makes razor cutting tough is a lot of people feel that it's a very loose technique, so they can take big sections or they can use a very loose or wide comb. You know, the technique that I like to practice is kind of the opposite of that. I take fine sections, sometimes even finer than scissor cutting, and I use really, really firm tension and fine combing. And I allow the movement of the blade to determine how soft it is, not my actual kind of mechanics. So right now I'm in my second section, still laying in the baseline, cutting across the hair with the edge of the blade, and this is still pretty closed. You don't want to open up too quickly, or you'll lose the definition. So I'm going to keep it closed probably, you know, for another 1 or 2 sections at this point. Coming in, I'll read it each time. Now again, Caitlin's got a ton of hair that I'm going to be taking a lot of weight out as the haircut progresses. So I need to have a good baseline or it'll get really weak and flippy. So the idea here is I want a really nice strong baseline so that as I move up, I'll have a lot more freedom to remove weight and reduce weight. Lots of tension here. You'll notice one of the little tips that I always give people when they want to get more tension is to fold the superfluous fingers in. The fingers that aren't holding hair are closed in like a fist. That makes a big difference. And my buddy Ricardo talked about that last week with scissor cutting too.
Jay's into your precision razoring.
Is that Jay Mahmood?
Of course.
Hey Jay, thanks so much. I appreciate you watching. You know, Jay and I and Ricardo went out for a little beverage the other night after Ricardo's demonstration, and Jay was wondering if I still was teaching. Yeah, so a lot of people have been asking me, do you still cut hair, do you still teach? And I said, hell yeah. I'm just busy, you know, kind of doing things for the Hairbrained community, but definitely still teaching, and that I made sure this week that I was going to do a demonstration here. So you can see this is what we call a closed stroke, just etching it in. It's just like sketching the hair. So when I comb this back and forth, I shouldn't see a lot of graduation on the line. I shouldn't see, it should feel one length, but with a little bit of texture.
There's a question from Matthew. When you say firm texture, would you say...
Firm tension?
Sorry, yes, yeah. Firm tension. Would you say it's just enough to pull the curl or wave straight without stretching or pulling the skin?
I'd say that's a fair analogy, but to be honest, you could actually pull the skin. So here's the difference with razor tension. So I can be quite taut, right? If I'm cutting with the scissor, I cut on this side of the hand. So as I'm cutting, the tension's affecting the cutting line. But with the razor, I come past the guideline. I've got really taut tension on it. I come past the guideline. Now as the razor hits the hair, the tension's actually disappearing as it's being cut. That's why you need so much tension. It's like a guitar string. If it's not taut, it's not going to sound like it's in tune. So it is definitely one of the big differences from scissor cutting. And I would almost say, you can't have too much tension here. Obviously, the hair can shrink a little bit, but it does shrink less than with a scissor cut because, again, I'm cutting behind my hand. So that tension just disappears the minute the blade touches the hair. So I'm beginning to gently open my stroke. This is probably my 4th section, and I've opened it up just a little bit. That just means a slightly larger stroke through the center to get a little bit of graduation happening. Now I'm in this transition point where I'm really into the occipital bone, and this is where I'm going to begin to reduce some of the weight before I even cut and open the blade a little bit more. So before I even cut the length off, I'm going to come through, trying not to elevate too much, and I'm going to use a little bit of what we call tipping, the last 2 inches of the hair above the line. This is kind of pre-lightening the bulk. You can see that took a little bit out. I'm not going to do it through the back of the ear because I want to maintain the corner. And I'm also going to open my stroke a little bit larger in the center, but then again, close it down. So if you look closely here against my shirt, this is going on a diagonal where there's most graduation to the least graduation. And then we want to lock it down as tight as we can behind the ear.
Are you, have you prepped the hair with anything?
Just water. Sometimes I will use a little bit of a leave-in conditioning spray, but I really didn't have anything available. I brought some finishing products, but I didn't bring any leave-in conditioner. You don't want anything too slippery, because believe it or not, the blade can actually slip off the hair. So you kind of have to find the right prep spray that doesn't make the hair overly slippery and you're still able to control it.
And do you use a new blade on every cut? I
do. I like a very sharp blade. I don't think that you have to, but I do. I like a very sharp blade, and I want to be in control. I want my stroke and my tension and everything to be in control. And I feel sometimes if the blade dulls, I can't read the hair. It's like drawing with a dull pencil. But everyone has a different feel about that. So combing this back and forth now, you can start to see that graduation, but you can also see the looseness. That's the beauty of this haircut is it can fold into itself and look really kind of clean and beveled, or it can have a beautiful light texture. Continuing on, again, fine sections, really that whole old kind of idea, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time? Caitlin's hair it's big. She's got a lot of hair. So break it down into small areas, small panels that you can control. Don't get overwhelmed. I'm keeping my technique very simple, but focused. Strong tension, over direction. First pre-lightening the hair by tipping, just grazing about 2 inches above the actual line that I'm going to cut into the hair. And that's going to put some invisible graduation and texture in here.
Everyone's loving it.
Great, thanks guys.
Marina wants to know, do you have any tips on how not to get your fingers slide while cutting? I'm not sure if there's a typo there or... So does she mean like while you're cutting so they don't slide down the hair? Maybe, yes.
Yeah, I think, what I try to do is I grab above the guideline just like you would with a scissor, and I stop, and then I bring this over, and then I slowly and deliberately move it until I can see the guide, and then I stop. So it's very, very focused. And you have to not be afraid for the razor to touch your finger. Believe it or not, if you've got good control and your thumb moves the blade, you'll be okay. The blade's moving up and down kind of like a piston. So the thumb will protect you. The thumb that moves the blade up and down. Again, a little pre-lightening using tipping. Trying to keep my tension. With tipping, you want to kind of do it like writing, left to right. The blade will work much better, and you'll be way more consistent. Try not to do it from right to left. Do it from left to right. And
if Marianne's been using a new blade with the razor, and it still seems to be pulling on the hair, would that have to do with her angle?
You know what? Usually, Marianne, in my experience, it has to do with your tension. So I'll try to show you what I mean. If I use the wide teeth of the comb, if I use the wide teeth of the comb and maybe don't grab the hair so tightly, the blade kind of pushes, see it like it pushes, it doesn't cut as accurately. So it just kind of like slams through the hair. In my experience, I mean, the razor can cut from a lot of different angles. And you know, right now I'm really kind of focused on edge cutting. So I'm cutting across the hair. I'm not super flat, but it's sharp and it'll cut from a lot of different angles as long as you have good tension. Fine teeth of the comb, really combing from the root, over direct the hair back a little bit so that as the blade comes through, you've got tension. It almost makes like an X pattern against the razor. So you're really important there. Other than that, it would be hard. I'd have to actually see you cut hair, which I'd love to do. If you ever wanted to come and take a class with us, we've got some new dates that we'll be putting out soon.
Ian was wondering if you could give some do's and don'ts for those who have never used a razor before. Maybe like some 101.
Yeah, don't rush into it. You know, first master the foundations of scissor cutting, or at least get really experienced with the foundations of scissor cutting. Because if you don't have the discipline and the dexterity, and perhaps you use the razor as a shortcut, it's an easy kind of path to very weak, messy, kind of junky haircuts, in my opinion. So first, really great scissor cutting, make sure you've mastered as much as you can. You know, next I would say take it slow. So this blade does come with a temporary guard, which I really recommend for lots of people when they're starting, because you know what, cutting yourself is never a good learning experience. So the feather plie and then the wooden one that we'll have soon comes with a temporary guard. It does kind of block you a little bit from getting that perfect feeling on the hair, but you can still cut well with it.
So that's a good way to, I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's like training wheels. It's going to get you kind of started. So we're definitely in New York City. You can hear, we're at the Crooked Fringe studio, my buddy Simon Miller's studio. We've got the windows open for this beautiful night, and you can hear a little magical New York stuff happening there. You can see that shape starting to come together. I especially love the expanded shape, but if it does get blow dried and turned under in a traditional way, you should be able to get a really pretty traditional shape as well.
Hey Adam, glad you're here with us.
Adam Federico?
Yeah.
Right on.
Marina would also like you to talk about the pressure you're putting on the hair with the razor. Is it light or?
In general, Marina, the pressure is always light. That's why I like a really sharp blade.
What do you mean by the pressure in general?
I mean, you know, if you took a notebook and you took a pen or a pencil and I said I want you to very, very lightly sign your name with a gentle pressure, you know, you could press very, very lightly on the page versus if I said really press firmly. So actually it's just like sketching or drawing, and you just have to really, really temper how much pressure you're using. I always say, you know, it's kind of a little old thing from Muhammad Ali that, you know, this hand is really tight. It's kind of like the bee. it stings like the bee. It's really tight and tough. And this one's very light like a butterfly. It just comes in and lightly does the work. So I'm starting to go into this next panel here. Again, I'm going to avoid excess elevation, maybe just a little bit, but not a lot. But I'm going to add one thing here now. I'm going to add kind of what I call slicing. And I'm going to do it very, very light pressure, very gentle. And this is starting to put some invisible layers above that panel of graduation.
So this is different than what you were doing before?
Yes, I'll explain that. So the slicing is a vertical movement that goes in much deeper, but it's just one vertical movement. So you can see how little hair it took out?
Yeah.
But it took it out right from the middle of the section. Tipping is something more for the ends of the hair to give kind of an invisible graduation within the shape. That was my tipping, and that's a horizontal movement. Slicing vertical, tipping horizontal, and now we'll come on and take off the excess length. So, you know, you're really working within density here. It's not just about geometry, which I think you have to kind of intuitively understand to work well with the razor. It's about the density of the hair. So here's a good example. I'm going to over direct this back. You can see my angle. I'm going to put a little bit of gentle slicing in here, and this is taking off just a very, very small amount of hair. And always look at what you're cutting off when you razor cut, because it's all about the negative space and seeing it. Now I'm going to put a little bit of tipping in here. And you can gauge this based on the thickness of hair. In each one of these panels, Caitlin's got more hair than most people have on their whole head. So I can be a little bit more aggressive with the tipping and the slicing.
Gina would like to know if you razor cut any texture, or is it more a certain texture?
You know what, Gina? I'll try to say the very least. I'd say the only texture that I found this type of razor cutting difficult for me is afro texture. That's like not relaxed, very natural, because the cuticle, the shape and the kind of squareness of the cuticle, I feel kind of it's just very difficult to do. But other than that, I'll start off just like anything and I'll see how it responds. I mean, I would say, the ideal hair, just like the ideal hair for any haircut, is medium texture with a slight wave that you can really manipulate.
Kind of like what we have here.
Yeah. Well, she's got very dense hair, but it is pretty ideal. It just takes a lot of time and patience. If I tried to kind of rush through this, it would just be kind of a mess. Hopefully it's not. It doesn't feel like a mess. It feels like it's looking great.
Hey Adam, the razors will be available. We had a few run, but they are sold out at the moment.
Yeah, Adam, the Feather Company has made a limited re-release of the wooden-handled plie. We had a few dozen that we sold pretty much in a day. So I've just put in an order for a larger amount, and you'll see them pretty soon up on Hairbrained Pro. It's a beautiful tool, and it's got the heritage and the legacy there of the wooden-handled plie that Bumble produced in a short run. I guess it might even be close to 10 years ago now.
Johnny Athona has joined us.
Hey, Johnny!
Marissa would like to know if the razors have a guard.
Yeah, this razor comes with a guard. If you want to use the guard, or if for some reason in your state you have to use a guard, you can put that on and use it. You get a little less sensitivity and control on the hair. I prefer to work without it, but you're fine to work with it if that's your comfort zone or you feel that that's abiding by the law. Come around this way, Kel, so we can see what's happening. So sections on a very steep diagonal, slightly over-directing, pre-lightening the hair, getting my angle set in. Very simple. Like, for me, razor cutting is very simple. It's just not easy. I don't do anything overly complicated or anything too intense with the sectioning, although I think you can. I like it as a very, very simple commercial tool to just kind of take some of the classic basics and make them a little bit more modern. So here we're just doing kind of a bob shape.
We had a question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
On the left side, are you cutting with the heel, and on the right side you're cutting with the...
Yeah, that's correct. So if you're right-handed, other than when you're tipping and slicing, because you always do that with the tip of the blade. So here I'm removing some bulk. Here I'm also removing some bulk on the line. And then traditional razor control here is as I cut to the left, I'll use the back or the tip or the heel of the blade. Yeah, it's really for comfort, hand position, body position. They don't cut differently, the heel or the tip. It just would be the way the blades are, to cut this side with the tip, it wouldn't work the same way. Now I'll come over to this side and you can see what we mean by tip cutting. Just favoring the kind of front corner of the blade. And it's more of a ergonomics thing than anything, so don't feel that it's going to change the haircut, although it can change the blade and it can push it in different directions. But I try not to overly stress about that. Using the tip for slicing and tipping for your weight removal techniques. Caitlin's hair is so thick that I'm doing some weight removal before I even cut the line. So that's kind of putting in some invisible layering, invisible graduation. Then I come back and cut the line. Now this side I'm favoring the tip, more open in the middle and closing down towards the back of the ear. Again, I love the movement and the texture and the wave, but every once in a while I'll check to see that if this is blow dried traditionally, that it's a nice beveled, kind of classic weightless bob, and that it's kind of falling into place. So it's the best of both worlds, I find, great razoring.
Any advice Megan would like to know on the way to tilt the client's head while cutting?
In general, Megan, the best advice that I ever got was from some French hairdressers. For a long time, I was a big believer in just try to keep it natural position all the time. And I can definitely see the benefit of that. But what I learned, in looking at some of the kind of Jacques Dessange and French hairdressers that seem to do things so gracefully and just very little amounts of movement, is you push the head away from you when you want to build weight. which I'm trying to do here. I'm building graduation. So you'll see me pushing it away from me a lot. Perhaps later when I get to the top and I want to make sure it doesn't get too heavy, I'll bring the head towards me a little bit. It helps me elevate lighter. So a way to keep weight and towards to lighten it. And you know what, a really simple way to practice or to really understand that is try it throwing scissor over comb. If the head's pushed away from you and you're trying to scissor over comb, it'll be really hard to cut the top short. If the head's pushed towards you and you're trying to scissor over comb, it'll be really hard to cut the bottom short. So just kind of basic technique there. Okay, so coming into the side now a little bit at a time. On this very steep diagonal, it really helps with razoring that the section is steeper because it allows me to over direct more and keep the swing of the cut. I very rarely comb the hair straight down when I'm razoring. I just find, back to the question before, that the blade can sometimes just push the hair. So this steep section allows me to bring the hair back because I comb right from the section. Getting a little bit of elevation now in the center. Using some slicing first to pre-lighten the hair. Then coming down right above the line, using a little tipping on the last 2 inches of hair. And then by the time I actually get to the line, some of this hair is still reaching the line, but not all of it. And that's one of the things that gives me a really kind of weightless graduated look. So when you look at it, you can see that it's definitely got a graduated quality to it, but in a very weightless way that I love. Over directing back. Very repetitive. I think a lot of great fundamental hair cutting is, and you have to just be consistent in your repetition. But I do welcome you to try to kind of create new things with the razor as well. I've found it best for me to do salon-friendly classics with a little bit of a twist. All right, so now I'm coming in over the ear, and I'm not going to remove any weight. I'm going to go back to just putting the line in. Really want to make sure I've got good tension and that hair's combed really well. Really coming back to the basics that I began with a closed blade and trying to get that line coming across over the ear and into below the jawline.
Jeremy Hickson's with us, and he wanted to know. Hey, Jeremy. He wanted to know how long it took you before you felt like you were really comfortable with the razor.
Well, I've been cutting hair for 26 years, and it took me 26 years, and it's still a work in progress. So I think if you want to be good at anything,
put it in your hands.
It takes you forever, man. I mean, realistically, I started at Vidal Sassoon, and I cut hair with the scissors for 10 years before I ever picked up a razor. And I think that really helped me so that when I picked up the razor, I understood some fundamentals, and I started using it pretty much the day I picked it up on paying clients. I kind of just took the haircuts that I knew from Sassoon, the Firefly, the graduations, and I just started practicing them with the razor. It's obviously very important to learn safety and control. As I mentioned earlier, the lock and the load is the best tip I can give you. With this razor, working this way is very dangerous. So the blade wobbles around and it can cut off hair. I prefer to lock it with the finger, pull it away, and I found that that's very, very safe for me.
Sam Kane is here with us, and she sees a lot of people using the feather razor, or I guess it would be the styling razor instead
the guarded feather razor. Yeah, they're both made by. Yeah. So both these, Feather is the razor company. They make the plie, which is this one, and it's called plie because it folds. That's a French word from ballet, it means plie. Yeah. And then the styling razor is the one that's got the hole in the end, and it's got a guard on it. When I use that one, I never put my finger in the hole, and I try to use it in a similar way. I'll try to cut this way because I like a rocking motion. I find that having the handle here, it gives me this fluidity to my stroke that you can't get with the straight stick razor. Now, a guard or not, that's up to you. There's nothing wrong with guards if they feel, if you feel safer, you feel protected, or if there's some law that you feel you have to follow. But for me, the most important thing is the fold. For this technique and to be able to get a really beautiful stroke, the bend and the fold, it always reminds me of like the woodpecker. You put it up, you just push it and it gets like a fluid momentum to it. If you know what I mean, not like old, not that I ever grew up on a farm, but I know that they have them. Anyway, so coming back into the side, closing my stroke down.
And just to finish Sam's question,
go ahead.
She uses the plie, but is there a difference in the cut line or the end result?
For me, there is. When I use the guarded styling razor, I can't get the subtlety. I can't really do a closed stroke like this as well. Personally, I can't.
And the closed stroke is very important.
The closed stroke for me is very important because I don't just use the razor for texture or to kind of break hair up. I use it very technically sometimes, and I use it to break hair up sometimes. But that being said, by no means, if you're doing great, anything that's happening here you can do with the styling razor or the guarded razor. I just prefer this, and I feel like it gives me a lot more connectivity to the hair.
And Jessica wanted to know, would you still use the slicing and tipping on someone with thin and or fine hair for a weightless looking long bob?
Yeah, obviously you might use less of it, or you might just use it on the last section. With Caitlin here, I started pretty quickly to remove weight because her hair is really, really dense. Maybe you'd just use it on the last 1 or 2 sections, or maybe you'd wait till you did the whole haircut and you'd evaluate the weight. So yes, absolutely, you can dial it up or dial it down depending on how much weight you want to take out.
Simon's here with us.
Hey Simon, how's Hong Kong? I hope you're having a good time over there, buddy. Thanks for letting us hang out here at the Crooked Fringe Studio. Simon's got this incredible studio here in New York City. It's kind of a video, photo studio, and we just used it this past weekend for a class, DJ Muldoon and I, called Scissor vs. Razor, where we kind of juxtapose the techniques. You know, he'll do a graduated bob with the scissor, and we'll teach that to the students, and then we'll do a graduated bob with the razor. And not to judge one versus the other. It's funny because everyone's like, who won? Who won? It's not really a battle. It's just to show you more in the kind of philosophical sense, because they're both great tools. There's no winning and losing if you're doing great hair.
Elio had a great question. When tipping and slicing, are you holding some of the sections that have been cut already?
Yes, and that's why it's so important for your pressure to be gentle. You can, if you're really worried, you can try to elevate and drop some of that previous hair out. But for me, I think of it like if I've got a notebook with 20 pages, I could probably press through hard enough and I could cut through 5 pages, or I could just very, very gently skim the surface. And it's a lot to do with pressure. It's one of the intangibles of razor cutting that you kind of just have to kind of practice. How's that feeling, Caitlin?
Good.
Yeah? Ready for the summer?
Ready for spring?
Excellent. Since I'm on this side, I'll do one more section. I feel like I've got a pretty good rhythm going on, and then I'll complete the other side, and then all that's left is the top. Combing this back. As far as dampness, we want to make sure we keep the hair consistently damp, just not dripping wet. Really important, because if it drips, then it'll slip. It'll be hard to control.
Amy had a question. Do you have any tips for bleached hair?
Yeah, great question. Razoring bleached hair can be really tricky because it's the cuticle's very, very slippery.
Sorry, guys.
So again, taking finer sections, I know that sounds counterintuitive, but taking finer sections, working with a very sharp blade, and be careful that when you work on bleached hair that it's not too wet, because the razor kind of slips off. And you know what, if the hair is damaged, be careful with razoring in general. Keep your strokes closed. Just like with a scissor, if someone's hair is really damaged, they should probably be cutting a lot of it off. And if they don't want to, you probably shouldn't be, texturizing it and slicing it, because it's just going to give it more of a broken appearance. In general, we're looking for good, healthy hair that can handle the weight removal, and we're trying not to scratch the surface and dull it. As I'm looking at this, I'm looking to make sure there's no, you can see that. The hair still looks healthy. It's just that the line is tapered and some of the weight is removed. I don't like hair that looks damaged or shredded. But you know what? Some people just feel that way about the razor, and that's okay. So if you're a hairdresser and you don't like razor cutting, that's fine. Do the best scissor cutting you can. If you get a client who doesn't like razor cutting, let them tell you and use a scissor, Absolutely, that's all about the consultation and the discussion. The one tip I'll give is I don't tell the client what tool I'm going to use. If in a consultation they tell me I don't like razor cuts, I go, great, no razor cut. But if they just tell me I want, like Caitlin did here, my hair's really thick, I want to lighten it up, I want movement, I want texture, I just made the decision to razor cut. She never said, but I don't want a razor cut. If she did, I would try to figure out how to do this with a scissor. And there's lots of ways to do that. You know, just like when you're doing color, you don't say, oh, is it okay if I use bleach? And maybe you do, but everyone's different. I tend not to work that way. But if a challenge arises, then I'll definitely switch to the scissor or some other tool.
Johnny Othone is still with us, and besides cutting with Josh LaMonica in London sometime in the near future, what do you think is the best cutthroat razor on the market?
A feathered plie, Johnny. I'm going to put one in your hand, and you'd be a very dangerous man with this. I can only imagine with your vision and your creativity, you know, just to kind of to push the envelope. I'd love to see what you came up with. So the feathered plie, that's what I use. Honestly, it's the only razor that kind of meets my standard. I wish there was others, but I haven't found anything. You know, a lot of people have made fun handles, but this part, the shaft and the blade, the feather is just so far ahead of anyone else, in my experience. And I've tried pretty much everything that's out there. A lot of the companies have sent me stuff, and you know, obviously we have a store, you know, but the thing with our store is I can only sell the things that I love and use. So this is the one that we sell. And this is the wood-handled edition.
Brittany would like to know if this would be good on thin hair.
It can be, Brittany, but you know, if you focus on the closed strokes and them not being too large, and then you focus on perhaps your weight removal in a more gentle way, it can be an excellent way to cut with fine or thin hair. But you really have to be able to, because you know, creating a little bit of texture even on the very ends of the hair gives it more body. But if you're doing a lot of, for lack of a better word, shredding, you might take out too much weight.
And again, we will have these, thanks Rob, we will have these razors available eventually.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, we had some and we sold this one. We still have the traditional feather plie, which is a black plastic handle, which is a beautiful tool that, but Feather made a kind of a special release of the wooden handle, which they haven't had in a very long time. And we just put it in order, so we'll have them again soon. Keep your eye on our social media. Slicing to remove weight. Again, from about mid-occipital bone down. A little bit of tipping right above the line to add some invisible graduation, and then taking off the excess hair that meets the line. And again, it's super important with razoring. You know, so much of it is visual. For me, it's the beautiful combination of technical and visual. So I really need to kind of move that hair with my hands and look at it. You know, I'm the kind, and if it does get blow dried under and precise, I should be able to see that as well by pushing it into place. And it should have, this particular shape should have kind of that Nancy Kwan kind of shape to it. With a feeling similar to what my good buddy Ricardo did on HB Live last week. If you guys didn't see that, he did a nice, beautiful scissor graduation, a long graduation with the scissor bob shape, last week's HB Live.
Travis Smith is here with us, and he was wondering about cross-checking.
Yep. So, you know, I will show you, and probably when I complete this next section, I'll check this panel. And I use tipping. Now you could, you know what, if you wanted to, you could switch to a scissor and you could use point cutting. And sometimes I'll do that at the end of the cut, or sometimes in the middle. If I feel like the balance is not as strong as it could be, I will pick up the scissor. I'll evaluate this in a minute. I think the balance feels pretty good because I've been kind of looking at it as I've been moving on. So I will probably just use tipping. Taking sections, you know, for lack of a better word, these sections have been much more horizontal diagonal, so I can check using tipping in a more vertical diagonal way, and I'll show you that in just a second.
And Johnny was wondering if there's any danger areas on the head while working with the scissor, the razor?
Danger areas, yes. I mean, just the same as with a scissor. You know, the hairlines can be jumpy and they can be hard to read. Around the ear you can get holes, which is why I'm using over direction. And rotating to make sure that as I work towards the front, it's lower, my elevation is lower. And then, you know, in terms of safety of the blade, anytime you get around the face, you have to be cautious. So, you know, obviously I think about my guest and I make sure that the blade is not close to them in any way. Even though I can get close to the body, I have to use a gentle pressure and be aware not to cut too close to the flesh. Although, that being said, in my 16 years of razor cutting, you know, I've been 26 years as a hairdresser, And after 10 years of exclusive scissor, about 16 years ago, I started using the razor. I have never cut a person with the razor. You're in
That's good. Okay. I was like, what's the end of the story going to be?
I've heard a few stories about it, but I've never actually seen it myself either. I think, respecting the razor is super important, but there's really no need to fear it. Really no need at all.
And Josh is still here with us, and he wanted to know some factors to consider when razoring curly hair.
Well, Josh, the first thing that I'll say is you have to kind of understand the rotation of the blade. So if this is a section of hair in my hand, the one thing that I never do with the razor personally is I never flat razor. So using the blade almost like you're shaving in a flat way, which you can do when you're doing aggressive textures on short hair or sometimes even straight hair. But if the hair is really curly and you do this, you really freak out the curl pattern, make it really frizzy. So I always cut on the edge or across the hair, kind of with what I like to call bias cutting. The blade's more on a diagonal. So you're getting, to some degree like a point cut effect without getting a lot of tearing or pulling. I don't do a lot of flat razoring at all. In the beginning of the video, I did it a little bit on Caitlin's hairline to cut it really short. And sometimes on short, kind of spiky, for lack of a better word, textured haircuts, I'll do it. But it's not something I do a lot of. So I've dropped this last panel down. Now this, obviously, if I blend it right in, it's going to be kind of weighty. I'm going to pre-lighten and then do the line. So I'm going to do this in 2 steps. And you know what? That'll allow me to do some cross-checking too. So I'm going to come through diagonally through the hair that I've already cut. And the type of cross-checking I'm going to do is tipping. I come right behind the line and I'm looking for density more than anything. Come through, you can see the graduation, you can see the transparency. As I used more and more openness and wide strokes, the hair should get more and more transparent towards the top.
What's the term that you use when slicing inside the section?
I call it slicing. I just keep it really simple. I've tried to, I've been a pretty complex hair cutter. I was an educator at Sassoon. I really spent a lot of time thinking about theory and words. And after 10 years of doing that and loving it, about 16 years ago, I wanted to move on and just maybe be a bit more abstract. So I've not created too many words. I just call this slicing, and I call this tipping, and I try to keep it as simple as possible. But I welcome people out there, to take it to the next level. So that's kind of checking for my buddy Travis. I'm checking, and that's going to take me into removing some weight from the top. So cross-checking in a more vertical way. You can see that it's going kind of from one length into some low or heavy graduation. But the checking that I'm looking for is the density of the hair. Not, it's such a simple haircut that the line or the shape should be there. And that's one of the reasons why I like really simple razoring. There's nothing overly complex about it in this case, but you're so engaged with the tool in the hair. Checking. You can take a little more weight out with slicing, check the ends of the hair with tipping. I can even kind of, if something's a little over. Now I'm getting into some of that uncut hair from the top. I'm not going to worry about the length yet. I'm going to put some slicing in first. So I'm layering the top from the inside out. I'm going to look at it. It's important to make sure you don't actually see any gouges in the hair. That's what I mean by gentle pressure. I'm coming in, I'll even go again. Her hair can handle it on the top. She's got more hair on the top than most people have on their whole head. But when I comb through with the fine-tooth comb, I shouldn't see any holes. And I've got some pieces that I can wait till later, or I can drop them down now and blend into the outline. Deliberately, I want some pieces to always reach the outline. That's what gives it this beautiful invisible feeling.
Is there a difference between the wood and feather plie handle and the non-wooden one? It would be the plastic one?
No, the only difference is the handle. The shaft, the blades, everything is the same. This one, they actually lasered feather onto it. It used to say, if you remember the Bumble one, it used to say Bumble on it, right there. So feather made this one now where it says feather on it. That's pretty much the only difference. And then the wooden handle. The wooden handle is a little chunkier than the plastic one, a little less slim. So, that's something you might want to, need to know about. But to me, it feels very comfortable. So a little bit more slicing, a little tipping to check. This was the uncut hair from the top, over directing down and back. I can see the line here, and again slicing from about occipital bone down. It's just like a visual reference point coming through.
We have some questions from the London guys, Jay and Johnny. They want to know about drying it. They're already foreseeing the future. Would you leave it to dry naturally?
You know, that just happens to be my style. I'll probably do mostly hand drying here. You could obviously use a vest brush, a round brush. You could do whatever you want. You know, the nice thing is that these layers on the top, some of them reach all the way to the bottom. So that makes it very stylable, as opposed to something that's maybe been more geometrically cut, where those pieces might not reach. It can be beautiful, but it can be a little harder to style. I think with this, there's a lot of versatility. And you know, just a little bit of history. You know, this type of razor cutting that I'm doing, I don't think it's anything new. As a matter of fact, I know it's been around, you know, since the 20s in France. It was a very popular way of cutting hair when the Marcel wave was popular, because with the Marcel wave, you know, you needed that hair from the top to reach all the way down, but you didn't want it to be super dense and thick. So razor cutting really kind of happened way back then. It's been around for a very long time. Okay guys, so we're getting through this. I'm doing two things. I'm trying to be economical here because I'm cross-checking the bottom that we've already cut using some tipping. I didn't put much texture on the sides, obviously, because we want to make sure we don't lose the line, but I am doing a little tipping there now. Now working my way up, I've got the graduation from the back as a guide. I'm coming inside the hair to remove bulk, and I can pivot this and swing it all the way around until I reach the top of the head. I didn't bring it back over the head, I brought it out to the side to keep a graduated, more weighted feel, but then I'm taking out the weight using slicing, tipping, and the razor in general. That's what I love about it. So I'm a classic haircutter. I've always loved the classic haircuts, but just like the Walkman became the iPod and the iPod became the iPad, we're trying to technologically make things more seamless. And that's what the razor's done for me.
Johnny was wondering about the difference between this on wet hair versus dry hair.
Johnny, I never razor dry hair. Personally, I can find it very, very damaging. It pulls the hair, and even if I can do it without damaging the hair, it hurts the client. I feel that it pulls. I've had people tell me that it pulls, where, in all honesty, Caitlin, does this hurt at all?
No, don't feel it.
Because the hair is damp and the movement is fluid. Now again, I hate to be that guy, because there's probably someone out there that does dry razor cutting and loves it, and I say more power to you. If it's working for you and your clients are happy and you're happy with the results, that's great. I've only got my own personal, I hate dogma. I don't think that there's a right and wrong, but I think that there's a working and a not working, and dry razor cutting just doesn't work for me.
Danielle Green is here. Thanks for being with us, Danielle. And Mustafa as well. Thank you for joining with us. Nanette says you make it look so easy.
It's not easy. It's simple. I will say it's simple. There's no kind of mind-twisting physics happening here, but by no means is it easy. It takes a lot of dexterity and control, but I definitely appreciate that. So you can see now I've been moving over, so I kind of worked up from the bottom with steep, kind of horizontal diagonal sections. Then I moved across the top with steep vertical diagonal sections, or diagonal forward. Now I'm over directing them back. I've got a baseline here. It's a little harder to follow guidelines with razor cutting, obviously, because they're thinner and more tapered. So again, you have to really use your intuition sometimes and know where it's supposed to be, which is why being a great scissor hair cutter helps, because you really know where you're supposed to be holding your hand, and then the guidelines should appear there to a certain degree. So using the slicing technique here from occipital bone down to remove weight, then coming in using the tipping technique behind my hand, and it leaves me probably with only about 30% of the hair reaching the line.
You got some fans, Caitlin.
Oh, hey. Hi, guys.
Caitlin's great. I've cut her hair a few times over the past years. She's a performer here, a singer, and does stuff on Broadway. Also does haikus.
Haiku.
You were telling us that some of your haikus are appearing up on...
That's true.
Yep.
Yes, it's all over the city.
Very, very talented. Also, if you're from from the Washington area. You might recognize her from the Nationals commercials.
That's true.
She's a fan.
I'm a fan
of the Nationals.
We use it a lot.
In the Washington area. And I think maybe your parents might be watching. Hi.
Hey, hi, Mama, Papa. Hey, Meg.
Awesome.
All right.
So again, you know, it is a little bit painstaking here, but that's what, you know, that's the precision part of it. Taking fine sections, really controlling, looking through the density of the hair. I'm going to finish this side off, then I've got the other side. Then we'll do some very simple blow drying because that's just my way. Over directing, slicing first. I see the guideline, my fingers are where the guideline is, but I'm reducing bulk from the occipital bone down to where the kind of triangular area of the graduation falls, visually creating that. The pressure is so gentle, I try not to cut through the sheets of paper, I'm right on the surface here. Then I'm coming in using a little bit of tipping, and again that works. Just like for me, slicing and tipping, I almost always do left to right. So here again, left to right. It's the way the blades are sharpened and it's what feels most natural, but then when I come to cutting the line, I use the heel, and I'm going from right to left. Through. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for your questions and your support. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. And I always like to ask people to hit the share button. I think sometimes we don't realize how powerful that is. That sometimes with this series, when people share it, you know, it gets so many more views and so many more people get exposed to it.
Do you tend to work from wet to dry?
I can't let the hair overly dry. So with scissor cutting, I do all the time. I work from wet to dry. With razor cutting, I maintain a consistent dampness, which is why the water bottle, you'll see it's constantly coming out every few sections, because I feel like I cannot comfortably razor the hair when it's too dry.
There was a question earlier that I happened to miss. So it was about classes?
Yeah, so we are doing more and more classes through Hairbrained. We just did 2 in the past few months, DJ and myself. We did something called Scissor versus Razor. We actually did it right here in this cool studio called the Crooked Fringe Movement in New York City, where the philosophy in that class is that there's lots of great ways to do things, and the more well-rounded you are, the more fulfilling your career is going to be. So we would show lines with the scissor, then lines with the razor, then graduation with each tool, then layering, and then disconnection, and try to get people to not compete, but compare the 2 tools and decide what's going to work best for them when, and to open their repertoire. We'll be getting more of those classes on hairbrained.pro very soon. We're looking at our calendar, and we're also going to do some stuff with our good buddy Julian Perlingiro, who's been doing the classic cutting series out in LA. We're going to get some classes out there with him, and we're going to try to move him around the country. It's a movable feast, so to speak. So we've done San Diego and New York. We're definitely looking at Atlanta, one of my favorite hair towns. Hopefully we've got some Atlanta people out there watching. I think it's one of the best hair towns in the country because a lot of great hairdressers, inspiring people there have made it that way.
Ian would like to know, do you always cross your fingers when razoring versus
Like
keeping them straight?
I do. Gives more tension. If you put your hand out like this to hold and you try to imagine you're having as much tension as you possibly can, then close this in, you'll get 15-20% more tension right away. So this gives me, I need maximum tension here.
Oh, Gary has an awesome, this is greetings. He was Cher's hairdresser for 6 years on the Sonny and Cher show.
Amazing. That's some legendary, some beautiful hair, Gary.
Started in the 60s, so I learned razor cutting then.
Right on, Gary. I have to say,
That's awesome.
Those are some iconic looks, and I hope you have an Instagram page and you share them, and if you share them and you tag Hairbrained, we'll be sure to repost them. I'd say, you know, top 10 hair icons, Cher is definitely in the mix, especially from that period. So if you were doing some of that hair, that's incredible, really incredible. So slicing, tipping, this is adding the graduation, and then I come in and take off the excess hair on the line.
Hey, Joy Che is here with us, and
Hey, Joy.
How do you determine the amount of slicing on each section without texturizing too much?
It's purely visual and purely feel. You know, that's where the intuition comes in. That's where looking at it, getting to know the hair. I wish there was a simple answer, but you know, it's kind of like highlighting. How do you know when you've woven too much or painted too much? You kind of have to trust it's not a technical answer for me to that. It's looking through the hair, moving it, constantly moving, looking, seeing how the hair is living and behaving. By over-directing the front is definitely going to be heavier because the slicing's just here, which of course we want that with a bob shape. We want her to keep that corner on the front. But it's one of those things where there's no simple answer. You just be delicate, and you can always do more, but you can't put it back. I'm excited to see Joy works with another one of my favorite razor hair cutters, Lee Clapson, and we're going to be out in Philadelphia broadcasting him soon. And I'm excited to see Joy, who is a trained Sassoon hair cutter who's now working with the razor, much like myself. I think that's very exciting, and I look forward to see what she creates. So combing through, looking at what's on the ends of the hair, putting a little bit of tipping. So I'm just combining a bunch of stuff here in a very, very simple but not easy way.
We're glad you're all hanging out here with us. Faith wants to know, although I think I can answer this, how long do you book for your clients, Gerard?
That's a great question. I, like most modern, hair cutters, was booking on 45 minutes probably for about the past 10 years because that's kind of, what you do in the salon, and generally 45 minutes. I switched to an hour about a year ago, and I'm so much happier. My work is so much better, and I think my clients are happier, and I think it's made a huge difference for me. So it's different for everyone. Listen, if I had to struggle to put food on my table, I'd book 10-minute haircuts, and I'd book as many people as I could, and I'd never say no. But when you get to the point maybe where you have a little bit more resources, I got to the point where I was like, I really want to enjoy this time. I only work on clients half a day a week. And I was like, why am I, trying to squeeze out that extra 15 minutes? Because if I was doing 6, 7, 8 back to back, that difference of 45 minutes to an hour really affected me. So I went back to an hour, and it's the best thing I've done. My clients are happier. I tell you what, most of the time I shampoo them, I blow dry them. It's made our connection even greater. They appreciate me even more.
Really, I was wondering if you're taking more weight out of the hair that's been cut?
Potentially a little bit, yes. Now, she can handle it. She's got a ton of hair. But as I keep saying, it's a pressure thing. So if this is 10 pages of paper, my blade is on the first 1 or 2 pages. It should only be connected. You feel it. That's one of the benefits of not using a guard. I can feel. So potentially I might be taking a small amount out from previously cut hair, but I don't think it's a lot. And if the hair was getting too thin, then I would know.
Does the angle of your finger in relation to the angle of your razor play a big part in the weight distribution?
Yes.
Again, that's from Johnny.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah. So I'm definitely trying to get something that is distributed from a higher point in the back to a lower point in the front, what we sometimes call A-line, triangular. I'm sure there's a lot of different terms out there depending on who's talking. So my sections are definitely all going in a diagonal forward pattern. My hand position is definitely angled higher in the back, lower in the front. It's a little bit less controlling than it is with the scissor because the razor comes in here, mostly. So it's not just clipping the ends or working below the fingers. I'm working a lot behind my hand, so that's where the visual aspect comes in. But yes, just like scissor cutting, there's definitely a correlation between section angle, finger angle, all that.
And Danielle would like to know, would like you to explain your elevation?
My elevation, pretty much everything below the round of the head, which is up to this point, I tried to keep some part of my hand touching the neck. So it was all quite low. Maybe not technically 0, but as low as I comfortably could manage. Through the top, because the sections now are coming at a different angle, they're coming diagonal forward, vertical diagonal forward, and then they're over directed back, and I pick up the graduation and the angle that I cut through the underneath, those are more, let's say 45 degrees. If those numbers are exact, I would be surprised, but I'm definitely working more graduated now off the head, but everything below here was much lower. Just like the other side, I'm going to do a little cross-checking. So I'll start in here, hold the hair down. You can see the graduation, a little bit of tipping behind the line. My hair's getting a little dry, so always got this handy dandy bottle here, not soaking it, but keeping it damp. Working my way up, bringing that hair down and in. And this will naturally take me into blending the top. Coming in right into the hairline, tipping, just using that front corner of the blade. Now, you know, with the density of Caitlin's hair, I'm starting to feel that blade kind of lose some of its edge. So I have to be really in tune with what's happening with my pressure, my stroke, and probably make sure I don't take my sections too thick. Not probably, definitely. If the sections start to get too thick, I'm gonna have a hard time getting the blade through the hair. So nice and fine. Now again, I'm checking and I'm starting to add. Checking here. You can see the angle of the graduation, but that it's a little bit in bits and pieces, and that's on purpose. You know, it's like appreciating smudgy eye makeup, you know, the smoky eye. Again, smoky eye not done well looks like a panda, or, you know, it can look like somebody that's been crying, but a smoky eye done really tastefully, the smudges are what makes it beautiful. And I think that's the thing with razor cutting as well. Okay, moving in. Now I've got this last light side of the parting to come through on a diagonal.
And again, I would like to know if you would ever razor your internal graduation before the external shape?
Sure, totally do that. Yeah, I mean, pretty much anything you can do with the scissor, you can somehow verse to the razor. If I was going to give any just real basic tips, the tip would be when you're razor cutting, you elevate less, you over-direct more, and you use the stroke of the razor to create the variance. So yes, you can pretty much do any of the things that you can do. Not that they'll come out exactly the same, but a lot of the concepts can be used the same way.
And Charlie's just mentioned he's loving their whites, Esteban.
Oh, good, I'm glad. Yeah, we made a comb that a lot of precision hair cutters really love. It's the white Esteban. But I'm going to change my blade because I'm feeling like I'm pushing it too much.
Damn,
so
girl.
Cutting through 3/4 of her hair is kind of like cutting 3 people's hair.
Can you show us how you're going to do this?
Yeah, this is important to learn. So this is the feather plie blades. You pinch from the middle of the box. There's a little lip here in the front. You put your thumb here. You push forward. The blade comes out. You grab on the side that's got the hole. You put that down. You try not to have a lot in your hands. You hold this by the shaft. You come like this, and the arrows, there's arrows right there. They line up, and you slide it in. I usually slide it in about 3/4 of the way. Then I come to a flat surface to do the rest. If you want, you can put the guard on. If you want to work for whatever reason, either you feel that it's safer for you, your client, or your state board, go right ahead. Okay, now I'm back. Now I have to be careful because I switched blades. This is probably going to feel a lot sharper. Oh yeah, so I just need to be gentle.
Nanette, we will go back in and drop links for all of you guys. Definitely.
Now I'll be honest, I can't tell you the last time I changed a blade.
That makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Your mama gave you some hair.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sure did.
Lovey would like to know, when do you think hairdressers will be replaced with AI?
I think that will never happen, but on the flip side of that, all the hairdressers who said I'll never be replaced by a robot or anything, they're being replaced by hairdressers that know how to use technology, because people that know how to use social media and get their message across digitally, they're doing really well. And a lot of hairdressers that maybe have a lot of skill but don't know those skills, they're not getting the fanfare anymore. So I think no will never be replaced by robots or by AI. I just don't see that happening. But knowing how to use certain types of technology, so important. I know that what I do with my career now, 6 years ago, I could have never even imagined it. I would have never imagined that I could demonstrate live like this. And if this is a popular video and people like it, it could reach 100,000 people by tomorrow or the next day. That's just, I couldn't go to 10 trade shows 5 years ago and reach 100,000 people. So again, it's all changing.
This is not the Bumble razor.
You know what? It is the Bumble razor. It's the same exact razor. The Bumble razor was made by Feather, and Bumble made a limited edition probably about 10 years ago. And then what happened was they stopped making it, and Feather just re-released it. It doesn't say Bumble on it anymore, but it says Feather on it, but it's exactly the same razor. And they're again in a limited supply. We have some coming into Hairbrained Pro within the next week or two, so we'll have them available there. But it is exactly the same razor. There's absolutely nothing different about it, except that it says Feather on it.
And it's considerably more affordable?
Yeah, you know, the cost is $150. I know that when it first came out about 10 years ago, I think it was close to $300 because I bought one because I was so jazzed to get it. But this one's it's $150. You know, I guess took off a little bit of the branding and we saved some money.
No, Jay, I have not had my hair cut yet.
I'm waiting for you, Jay.
I have not had a haircut in a long time, and yes, I have worn a bob.
Oh yeah, I've definitely used Kelly as the model many times for variations on a theme here. All right, so cross-checking through the sides, getting into these last few sections. We're kind of rounding third base here, tipping in the bottom, looking through. Now here's the top that was uncut that I'm over directing. I'm using some slicing here, and that's kind of pre-removing the weight. Then I'm using some gentle tipping, and then I'm taking off that last 25-30% that's still reaching the line. And again, the line is here. Hopefully you can see that coming through. It's way more diffused than it would be with a scissor, but it's the same. It's the same for me. I think, you know, one informs the other very well. Again, taking fine sections, keeping that hair damp. At this point, I almost need to dampen it lightly on each section because it's drying so quickly. We've got some lights in here and so forth. A little bit of checking. Not so much slicing over the ear because, you know, we don't want to lose the density there. But now getting up into this dense area, I'm working kind of from the top of the occipital bone down, rotating the hand off to the side. And again, working through to the front.
I believe I would be able to say yes to this. When Johnny Point cuts into the hair, each time he counts to have more consistency.
Sure.
Do you ever count?
Rhythm is a dancer, baby. Yes, and when I teach people to use the razor, we teach rhythm. So if you come around, you can see here if I was going to first do some tipping here, and I was going to over direct this back, it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, very consistently. With the slicing, again, in my head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Losing a little bit of tension there, so I'll recomb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see there's definitely a rhythm there, that up and down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It helps when that becomes second nature.
And Nicole was wondering if you're razoring with the blade open more?
You could call it open at this point, yes, because, you know, I put in a strong baseline. Open means, you know, you can tell the hair's further away. So obviously I'm doing a lot of tipping and slicing, and then when I come in to cut the actual line, the blade is definitely more open. It's not the most open it could be because there still is, you know, a flow to this haircut that's somewhat geometric. You still have a little bit of what's called an A-line flow. And I think if the stroke was too open, you might lose that. So rather than that, I'm kind of reducing the weight by first slicing, then tipping, then using a kind of a midway open blade. And in terms of openness means the size of the stroke. So obviously these are pretty open because they're all about texture. Then when I come down to tip, it's maybe about the last 2 inches. And now when I want to remove this little bit of last bit of length here, it's maybe about 1 inch into the hair. And I'm always looking at what's in my hand. to get a good feeling for it. Okay, I think we're rounding third base.
Yes.
With like the last piece here.
Feels so much lighter.
Yep.
So good.
And flexible. This is what I love. That end there, it can turn under, it can kick out. I might take a little bit more off there. We'll see. You know, the difference for me with razor cutting to what I traditionally did with the scissor. With the scissor, I try to build as perfect of a shape as I possibly could, and then I would kind of dismantle it a little bit, soften it, texturize it, break it down. With the razor, I try to build kind of a rough sketch of a shape, but with lots of balance and attention to detail, and then afterwards toughen it up. So I might come back with the scissor now and, you know, snip a little. It's like the opposite progression. Rather than softening it, I might strengthen it.
Nicole was wondering, would you say that cutting with a razor is mostly about the feel of the hair?
I'd say a big part of it is, but there's a lot of technique involved as well. And I think that, you know, you have to have that technique. Otherwise, you can kind of really just chop hair up. And hopefully I've done a little bit more than just chopping hair up. You know, that there's some shape and some texture all kind of working together in a very logical way. Because the front is so thick and it was over-directed so much, I'm going to come in a kind of an inside-out way and work from the front to the back and use some tipping where it needs. So my sections are now going in the opposite direction. I'm looking at the graduation from the bottom to the top, perhaps looking through the hair, really getting my head around so that I can see what needs to be lighter. And again, I do this with the scissor as well. It just more focuses on the line itself rather than the density. Where, you know, hopefully the line here at the ends of the hair is fine. I will maybe check it with a little scissor cutting at the very end, but I'm way more concerned with the density and the flow.
Richard wants to know the opinion on razor cuts, the maintenance and the end splitting or the loose shape compared to a shear.
I think a lot of factors play into it. I think, you know, for me, I can only say what my clients have told me over the past 16 years, and I've had a lot of them that maybe I cut with a scissor before I started to learn how to use the razor. And one of the reasons why I started to razor more was because my clients told me they liked it better. They said their haircuts lasted longer, they grew in better, they felt more contemporary. So I based the choice on them. I can't say that I've never had someone come back and say, hey, I prefer a scissor cut, because definitely some people have, and then I gladly go back to a scissor. But overall, the majority of people that I take from scissor to razor, for me, tell me they really love the razor cut and they're happy with it. So that's how I base it.
Also ties into a question earlier about, you know, how do you getting clients to convince them or trust them that the razor is going to be okay? Maybe they have a preconceived negative.
I don't have the time or the patience to convince anyone of anything. If a client tells me in the consultation, I don't like razor cuts, I say, great, we'll give you a beautiful scissor haircut. And I just don't, as I'm cutting it, I can talk to them and find out why they don't like razor cuts. I can cut it with the scissor and find out, but I never want to be in that position. It's like having a client come in and say, I hate red hair. You know, I want to get my hair colored, but the one color I don't want is red. Last time I was red, my dog died, I got hit by a bus, my husband left me. I hate it. You know, now if you're the type who wants to, oh, you would be beautiful in red. You know, I disagree with you. I'm just not that type. And it's the same for razor cutting. On the flip side, when someone comes in, they say they want lightness, they want movement, whatever they want. I don't say, is it okay if I use a razor? I just start cutting. And what I found is if it doesn't hurt or pull, they don't even notice the difference of what tool you're using. I have lots of clients that probably couldn't tell you if I used a scissor or a razor on them. Just like you have lots of clients who don't know if you use bleach or high lift color. If you're a professional and you take their safety and you don't burn them or hurt them or cut them or, you know, pull on their hair, that's how it's worked for me.
Now Johnny was wondering about using a cutting lotion like Day or...
Yeah, in general, you know, those can work great. I didn't have any tonight, so I really just worked with water. As long as it doesn't make the hair too slippery, because you definitely need tension. So if you can find a cutting lotion that's not too slick, because any loss of tension makes it really challenging to control the hair.
Faith was wondering about, do you ever cut with scissor then razor?
Sure. More often I cut with razor than scissor, but I do think that that's a very viable thing.
You might bring out the scissor before you finish.
Yeah, but if you cut a shape with the scissor and then maybe rather than point cutting and slicing, you decide to do some rate like what I'm doing now, I think that's great as well. How you feeling?
Good.
Looks beautiful.
It's
huh?
fun. Yeah.
Tipping and slicing will always travel from left to right when you're right-handed?
It doesn't always have to, it's just a tip that I think makes it work better. So I think there's a couple reasons. Number one, the plie blades are honed on the right side and not on the left side. And naturally we write from left to right, so your fluidity from left to right and your control is just so much better. But it doesn't mean that you can't go from right to left. It just doesn't feel as fluid. So, the one thing I hate is dogma.
Anything.
There's no right or wrong. There's no never do this, always do that, because that's boring. I'm in my 26th year and I hope to be cutting hair, forever really, and on my own terms. So and what I've learned is things that maybe at one point I said never do this or never do that or always do this, I eventually find a reason to change my mind. So
just like to take a minute and thank everybody that everyone's still hanging with you, Gerard.
All right.
Everyone's still hanging?
How long have we been going here?
For a while now.
An hour and 16 minutes.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Told you I'm back in the hour haircuts.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for hanging with us, everybody.
A little bit. This is probably the last little bit. Then I might pick up my scissors for a minute, and then we'll think about putting in some product. All right, so when switching to the scissor, I'm going to switch to my HB Pro scissor, which is something that I designed for comfort. And really, I'm a big point cutter. I very rarely cut very blunt. So the offset handle really helps with that. So now I can come back through the ends. And again, if there are any frayed ends or anything, I call it sealing the ends. Because yes, if you've pushed the razor a lot, maybe you have made the ends a little too weak, or you might be a little sparse. So coming in just the very ends with point cutting. Now I know a lot of people will say, oh, what's the point? But I disagree. To me, everything that's happening in here is the beauty of the razor. It doesn't mean the ends have to be thin. They can be very soft and tapered, but anything that looks excessively weak, and just something about it, I don't know if it's just my background, I like that feeling of sealing the ends a little bit.
And I believe, yes, this haircut should technically take an hour, but we're talking and hanging out with everybody.
You know what? Some people can cut hair fast. Some people take a long time. Find the clients that appreciate it. My clients, if I cut their hair, honestly, if I was to do a 15-minute haircut, I think my clients would be like, what the hell just happened? But some people, if you did an hour haircut, they'd be like, what the hell? Why is this guy taking so long? There's different clients out there for everyone. And there's different levels. This is a simple but intense haircut. I probably could have done it a little faster if I didn't say a word. Maybe I could have got it done in about 45 minutes to an hour. But since I'm talking, walking through, taking my time. But again, different strokes for different folks. Coming back in. Sometimes the luxury of time. That's another great question. I remember people asking me, how long does it take to do a haircut? I say, well, what's the situation? I could probably do a 15-minute bob with graduation if I really had to. I can do an hour, I can do a 2-hour, I can do a 3-hour. It's, it's up to you. You're the chef. You decide what you want it to be. So coming back through the very ends with the scissor, sometimes I call it air cutting.
Is this also like cross-checking, would you consider
Cross-checking, yep, using kind of an inside-out approach.
What does that mean exactly?
The angle of the sections and the way the weight is building. It's a technique from the Sassoon in the 90s, the contemporary classics called inside out. So it's a nice way to apply a lot of fluidity to a graduated haircut. Graduated from the back to the front, and then check from the front to the back. It's about movement. One of the things, I was very lucky in my life to get to meet Vidal a few times, and one of the things Vidal always said was, it was about getting that hair to move and fall into place. And one of the ways that they did it was, and he said this line many times, we'd cut it from back to front, and then we'd cut it from front to back.
Well, that's funny. That's what Gary just mentioned. It doesn't matter as long as you get there.
Exactly. And sometimes getting there by going in different directions, as long as you understand the shape. I mean, if you saw me cutting off inches of hair right now, rather than dusting and refining, then something would be amiss. You know, if I was to go into these angles and there was massive amounts of hair that didn't fit in, then I might have made a mistake somewhere. But instead, what I'm doing is sealing the ends. And this is, you know, a certain level of appreciation, I think, for razor cutting. Not all razor cutters do it. Some people, when I first did a little bit, I picked up the razor with no training, just applied my Sassoon training and started playing with it. And then I decided to go and take some classes. And one of the teachers told me never use a scissor on a razored haircut. And I kind of did that for a year or two. And I was like, you know what? I actually liked it better when I was using the scissor a little bit. I made my own decision and I went back to it. So use what works for you and your clients and what makes for a great result. Coming right into the hairline. Now you can see that underneath from the very beginning, those of you that have been watching all along.
There's been a lot of you guys watching. We appreciate that.
That's the thing that I love. There's no hard bob line. It just melts out into the skin. I just never really loved hard lines next to skin. That's just me. That's how I've applied it.
Do you avoid taking the razor all the way to the root?
Yes. I avoid taking the scissor or the razor all the way to the root. I think, again, you know, some people do that, but what it would really collapse the hair, collapse the shape, and potentially make some very short, sprouty pieces. But again, I'm the guy who's just saying no dogma, do what works for you. My good friend John Raymond, he's a very successful hairdresser. He's done stuff like that all the time. And he's got a successful career, it's working for him. If it works for you and you believe in it, stand by it and do it. Learn as much as you can from as many people as you can. And appreciate the craft and the art of what we do. And the diversity. So last little bit of checking now on this top area. Pulling it over. Again, not going into the hair, just the very ends. It's a sealing. Sealing of the ends. S-E-A-L-I-N-G. If you see what's on the scissor, it's dust. But to me, that dust...
important? That's that important?
It is to me. I feel like it really seals the ends of the hair. You know, then there's maybe something like that. That doesn't necessarily do anything for the hair or the grow out of the hair. So this is one of the things that I've had success with clients, with models, is doing this little bit of extra work and sealing the ends of the hair, looking for anything that might not grow out as well. And then moving it around, and at this point it should feel like it looks like the way I want it to look. I can do now a little bit of that sealing work on the perimeter. I could blow dry it really flat and straight, which I'm not going to do. I'm going to work with it more naturally and detail it, again, using point cutting. There should be a form, but not necessarily a hard or blunt line. Coming around here. And even at this stage, it shouldn't be inches of hair cut off. It should just be little bits of hairline refinement, little bits. Perhaps you were elevating, so you got a little bit more graduation in certain places. You know, you've really deconstructed the bob.
Judy and Roddy are tuning in.
My uncle and my aunt.
Yes,
Aunt
of
Judy.
course, Judy.
Thanks, guys. Okay, it's time to put the tools down. Just get the hands to work. She's looking gorgeous, feeling good. Mm-hmm. Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to use a little bit of product. I brought some of my fun product that I've been playing with from Davines. One of the great things with Hairbrained is we work with so many different brands and they give us product all the time. So I've been playing a little bit with the Your Hair Assistant line from Angelo Seminara for Davines. And this is the Blow Dry Primer, which I really think is a fabulous product. And lots of times I'll just spray something like this in and just let it air dry, which I think I'm going to do here. I don't feel any need to use heat or to blow dry the hair. Again, that's different for everyone. You could go in and blow dry this, use a round brush. Now, Caitlin, we already talked about, she got a ton of hair. She doesn't have time to, I mean, if you put some product in and it dried like this,
it's pretty much wash and wear.
Pretty, it's modern.
This is your summer look right here.
Yeah, really.
Back to that concept of wash and wear, one of the things I loved most about Vidal was the wash and wear concept, that the haircut could really fall into place. And I really was able to embrace that again after years of blow drying and flat ironing. When I started razor cutting again, I really felt like I could do more wash and wear hair again, which I really loved. And you know, it depends on the clientele. I have clients that are willing to pay more to do less, if that makes sense. So I try to say that, you know, if with the haircut we can make it all happen, then you don't need to blow dry. Put some product in, use your hands. You know, in a very humid climate like New York City, nobody wants to get up and blow dry their hair for an hour in the morning.
It's like lighting your head on fire.
They just want a beautiful shape. Now, I know some people will be upset. You know, they'll be like, you have to blow dry. I get that. And I think, again, if you wanted to, you can see here that you'd have a kind of a traditional bob with graduation kind of a feeling. And perhaps you could get in and do some more detailing here and there once it was perfectly straight. But it's just not my thing. I like the imperfections. I think that, you know, the natural expression of the hair is what I love the most.
Lee Clapson is here with us.
Hey there, Lee.
It's nice to see you working with your razor that you love.
Yeah, Lee. Hey, man, I'm excited to come out and visit you. I know we're going to be out visiting Lee, who's a master razor cutter. And the one thing I'll say about razor cutting, not the one thing, I've said nothing but things about the razor for an hour, is that much like a pen or a pencil, many of us can be trained to hold it in the same way, but all of our signatures become unique. And I think when Lee razors, the outcome is different from what I do, and I love that. You know, I think lots of times with precision scissor cutting, the goal is to be able to really replicate something like, okay, I'm going to do it this way, now you have to be able to make it exactly the same. And I think that creates a standard, but I think with razor cutting, it's more of an individual signature. And I don't think one is good and one is bad. I just think that that's the way that it is.
He's mentioning it's the human element.
That's, you know, Lee's got some great terminology, and that's one of the ones that I really love, the human element. So just looking at the line, moving, letting the hair air dry a little bit. You know, typically one of my favorite things to do is to put in a nice light product like this and then put someone under the heat lamp.
Steven Setland said you can't teach feel.
You can't, but you can expose people to it, I think. You know, and that takes a while. But no, you can't bottle it and teach that easily. You can't teach taste either. So much hair.
We're slipping on your hair.
Almost there. I'm moving it back and forth, really using the mirror now. I think there's just a few last snips to do in the front right here.
What are you looking for that makes you realize that you need to snip something?
I'm looking for the flow of the hair. That when I move it, it falls back into this flow that I want, which is kind of a deconstructed graduation. I can see that it's higher to lower. I can see not a line, but a flow of a line. I can see the texture is there, and I'm getting exactly what I planned for, and with a few little surprises along the way, because that's the beauty of the razor. Okay, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this. Thank you, Caitlin, my beautiful model, who we cut off all this hair today. Thanks for staying with us. We're going to just let this air dry naturally.
We'll definitely put up some after pics, but I mean, it's not going to be any much different than what you see right here.
It's not going to be any different than this. That's how I work.
Cool. Thank you, Caitlin.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for hanging out with us, you guys. See you all again. Thanks, Flossie.